Okay, guys. So we are live. This is a restaurant episode 4. Butch, Hiles, Garry Hashman here. Just want to go over some news and updates. Me and Butch are just going to catch up because we haven't really talked to each other we talked to each other last week, but we don't get to hang out and talk to each other the way we like. So just kind of fill each other in on day-to-day stuff that's going on, life stuff. I know we've had a lot of things going on. I had one of my guys went to Toughman in Parkersburg and competed down there. Butch recently had a seminar that he did down in Weirton with the Weirton Bondo guys, and then of course there were fights on last night too. And I have some news that I have to tell too. Butch, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Obviously, like you said, it was a busy week. Last night, or really throughout the day, I had traveled to Pittsburgh, basically Weirton, West Virginia, which is essentially Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then from there, I had to go to Cincinnati, Ohio. So then I got back to Charleston, West Virginia, probably about 12:30, 1 a.m. Missed the fights that you're talking about, but did catch up on the highlights. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But among those things that we got to talk about, which, like you said, is the Toughman and how our guys did, the seminar that I did yesterday, the UFC. Let's lead into, you kind of have a big announcement. Instead of saving it for the end and keeping everybody on the hook, let's just get to it and let everybody know what your big announcement is and what's going on with you.
Yeah, pulling the Band-Aid off quick. We've been given the opportunity, my family's been given the opportunity to move to Greensboro, North Carolina, and make a little bit better life for ourselves and for our kids. And so it's an opportunity we can't pass up on. My wife's getting a pretty good raise in her salary, and is being a bigger city and more opportunities for kids and more opportunities for me as far as just like life stuff and adulting. And so we're going to be moving down there sometime soon. I'm going to stay in the Athens area. I've got a house in Gloucester, and so I'll still be in Gloucester through the summer, and don't plan on leaving until the new school year starts for the kids, and I'll be back down there. But I'm going to be moving probably midway through August, I would imagine. And so now it's causing a lot of questions about what's going to happen at Bobcat and what's going on with the gym. So
absolutely. Well, first and foremost, as far as the podcast goes, luckily there's this new thing called Zoom that happened during the pandemic. So it's going to be nothing, hopefully people like it, because this is what it is. Garry happens to live in Ohio and I live in West Virginia. And now he's going to be moving to North Carolina. So instead of us being on location at studio, this works out pretty good. And obviously Zoom's got better and better. So it's not that bad a thing. So we're going to be fine as far as podcasting goes. But let's talk about your gym. I mean, and you and I have talked about this, but like for the guys that don't know, what does this mean for your gym? What does this mean for the guys training? And then maybe still people that are looking at your gym as far as going and training there.
Yeah. As far as things go right now, I'm trying to talk to the guys. I would like to see it continue. And I would like to come up on a regular basis, maybe once or twice a month, depending on how much I can swing for that. But it would have to, the guys that are there would have to, probably take over a lot of responsibilities. Right now I'm there 6 days a week and I teach like 16 classes or something like that. Or I don't know. My math might be real bad, but it's a ton of classes, 14 classes, 13 classes that I teach. So now it's, I understand that everybody has their own life too, and that this was my endeavor, and I don't think anybody else is responsible for taking over or doing things. And so I'm not asking for that out of anybody either. But it is, it is something that I would like to see somebody take up if possible. If it was a communal effort and some of the guys, hey, I'm going to do a Monday class, people can come. Hey, I'll do a Thursday class and people can come. That would be great. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen and things change, and I'm not terribly upset about it. As far as like upset the guys aren't taking it over. There is the sadness of like, hey, I feel like I'm leaving guys behind, and that sucks.
It does, it does. And just so people understand too, I guess you and I can talk. I've moved a few times, and so has some other people that have been affiliated with us. And first of all, we can never be mad at somebody for doing better for their lives, right? And so what I'm saying is, I'm just talking for guys that are at your gym. First of all, it's sad, right? It's a change. None of us like change. So that's the thing. They're used to you, and they're used to what happens. But again, nobody can be mad at you for doing what you need to do to make your life a better place, right? A better thing. So good luck with that first and foremost. But secondly, like here's the thing: as a group effort, I'm willing to chip in too. If you're going to make it once or twice a month or whatever it may be, and if you need me to come down and help, I can. I know the guys are looking for some guys to step up. You're in a unique situation where, other than your striking coach, who I assume that is around, but a lot of those are college guys, right? So they're in the duration of college, and they may or may not leave, and that creates problems as far as just teaching, right? So hopefully, look, as a group effort, let's keep this going. This is something I think is needed in the area. Um, and really, and if it makes sense, I think you need to keep your dream alive, right? So hopefully we can do that for you, and I'm certainly here to help, whatever I can do.
Right. I appreciate that, Butch. And anybody that has any ideas, I'm open to ideas. So if you're saying, hey, let's work something out, and I'll I've got this idea that I can run by maybe classes will be, there won't be as many classes run every week, but there's still something going there. That'd be great. And so I was, when I did this, I was never looking to make any money. So even if I'm not making money or whatever, that's fine. I was doing it because I love it. I love jujitsu, and I love sharing jujitsu and teaching jujitsu. And it outside of my family stuff, it's easily my favorite thing. And the only thing that could have taken me away is bettering my family, bettering things for my family. And so I it's going to be one of those things when I am down, and when I do leave at the end of the summer, I'm sure there's going to be tears shed and lots of drinks before I leave too, I think.
Good. Yeah, it's always good. Well, here's the thing: you've made a positive impact, obviously, right? It's hard for you and I to admit that when we talk about ourselves and we talk about our stuff, but you've done a good thing for the community, and you've done the good thing for the guys that work out for you, and you will continue to do good. And here, and while we're on here, hopefully somebody's listening to this. Where are in North Carolina are you moving to? Is there somewhere that somebody can write in and say, hey, here's a great gym for you to go to? Here's some things I suggest. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
No, if somebody happens to be from Greensboro or the Greensboro area and knows anything about the jiu-jitsu, I know there are like 4 or 5 different academies within about 20 minutes, 30 minutes of each other. And so starting an academy down there as a brown belt would probably not be a great idea. And there's already plenty of places to train with people who are probably more qualified than me. But as far as training, if anybody has some place that they know is a good place to train, I'm open to any and all advice.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll hear something. What area are you moving to? I know you said it already, but remind me.
That's okay. Greensboro, North Carolina. So it's like
from Charlotte.
It's about an hour and 15, hour and 20 from Charlotte, I think. So it's between Charlotte and Raleigh.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked, like way back when I was with Hoist Gracie, he had a strong Team Rock, I think was in Raleigh, Durham, I think, and close to Charlotte, which is a good place. But I'm telling you, I bet you there's a million places there, right?
Yeah.
It's not West Virginia, which is different. We got about 5-6 gyms in the entire state. Ohio's more like a regular state in the United States, where you guys got a lot more, especially you're close to the area in Columbus, which has got a lot more people. But I'd say here's the bottom line: you'll end up with some great people, great places to train. I've trained with a ton of people up that way. Those guys are awesome. So it looks good. So it's positive, and it's sad for everybody, right? Like, again, nobody likes change. I'm sure you don't either, but at the same point, you got to do something that's better for you and your family. And this is it. Even your gym is something that's better for you and your family, but everything grows, everything changes. Now it's time to take that next step. I'm excited for you, right? Like it's going to be probably a bumpy road getting everything started over the next couple of years. Hopefully it's a seamless road, but look, we all know how this goes. You might go to a couple gyms, you might not jive with the people, you might be hard to get things running down here. But again, you've got friends, you got things happening. So hopefully that goes good. But let's talk in the midst of that. Since we're talking about your gym right now, you had how many people compete in the Toughman this weekend?
So I had one guy, Mark Heflin, competed at the Toughman in Parkersburg, and then from Sam's gym, which is my striking coach, is Seth Jones, and his grandpa is Sam Jones over at Sam's gym. And Sam, I know, had one guy from his gym that was down there as well. Mark had a great first night. Friday night, he went down and competed. He was gangster about it. He went down there by himself. Nobody was there. I had to run classes. Other people had, they got kids and stuff that their life that they couldn't go down with him. So Mark just packed his bag and went down there and beat the snot out of a guy. Got a second round KO on his first night, and then came back Saturday and had his second fight against a guy who looked like he had a little bit of boxing and was a little more knowledgeable than his first opponent. But we were there for him and supported him and got to yell at him from outside the ring while they blared AC/DC music. So that was nice.
Yeah. Well, and for guys that don't know what a Toughman is, or Rough and Rowdy for that matter, which are very similar, but guys, just so you know, because here's the odd thing for guys that don't know, it's actually not very popular outside of our tri-state area, right? Banned in a lot of states, but essentially it is a boxing match with a 1 minute time limit, where two guys have 1 minute to literally beat the crap out of each other, and and then a minute rest. It's 3 rounds, and it's tournament style. I don't know. They've changed the rules over the year, and they added a few more weight classes. It used to be just 2, like over 185 and 185 and below, but I think they have like about 4 weight classes now. But
I want to say that there were 5, maybe 6 maybe 6, but I think it was 5 weight classes.
Which is
because
yeah, that's one of the improvements, right? That they've been trying to improve it over the years, because obviously, even if you're 186 or you're in a heavyweight and you're going with a guy that's 450 pounds, it's not the best, right? You know what I'm saying? It's so they're making it a little bit safer by doing that. So why everybody hasn't heard of it is because of that, right? Like, here's the thing that's kind of weird, is that you literally can enter a Toughman. You can, just like the old UFC where people used to joke about it, like Tank Abbott and stuff, and they say, like, I got off the bar stool and went and got in a fight. That essentially is what Toughman or Rough and Rowdy is. People never train. In fact, Gary's probably used to it. I know at my gym, this is what happens. I get phone calls all the time, say, hey, can you train me for a fight? And I'm like, when is your fight? Well, next week I'm in the Toughman. I'm like, so you have a fight in a week and you're now just training? Unfortunately, that's what this is. So that's the good and bad. Here's the good and bad on my side. If I was going to view Toughman, Rough and Rowdy, I do not watch it as a fan. I'm just not a big fan, as far as if I don't know anybody. Like, if you're competing, I'm a fan of Garry and I'd like to see Garry fight. But if I don't know who's in it, to me, it's it's 2 guys throwing windmill punches that don't know how to fight. And it's kind of comical sometimes. And quite honestly, that's why a lot of people go, they laugh. Not that there's not great knockouts. There's a lot of entertainment value. But it's sometimes to me, it's like watching a YouTube fighter fight these fights, other than, not to knock on Jake Paul and them, because they're actually very good. But look, I don't want to watch guys that don't know how to fight somebody that does know how to fight. It's kind of, I know what's going to happen. There is some entertainment value of it, obviously, but it's just not enough to make me watch. So I'm not going to pay my money to watch typically. However, when my friends are in it, I watch. I've trained people to fight in all of them. I've trained people that won in all of them. I do think there's value in it. I like the guys that promote it. And I would say this, there's Chris Smith in our area does Rough and Rowdy, and Jerry Thomas does Toughman. Those guys are pretty good guys. I've met them. I think they have a good product as far as what it represents. It gives like a great avenue for, like, for example, if you have 10 guys in your high school fighting, everybody's going to show up to watch these guys fight, right? It's actually a great idea because you're going to get people from this high school, that high school, this college, this gym. It's a great marketing thing. I do think there's value in it. I'm just not a big fan of watching people that don't know how to fight. That's all, you know, man. So that being said, when Gary's guys fight or my guys fight, we know they know how to fight. They'll go in, and quite honestly, let's also be honest, you sometimes can lose to people that don't know how to fight. The reason is it is 1 minute of somebody just throwing like a buzzsaw, right? And sometimes they land lucky punches. I hate the word lucky punches, but it's not so much that you're going to get knocked out. If one guy's more aggressive for that minute and one guy's trying to set up punches, you know, as a boxer, this is actually a hard fight as a boxer because you can't really box it because you're going to lose the round because you're not doing anything.
Yeah, well, that was something because Seth came with me and we were down there, and that was something me and Seth were talking about. He said, you know, the fact that you're fighting some guy who doesn't really know what he's doing, he does a lot of things. You might catch a guy who's super unorthodox in his style of fighting. And because he doesn't know how to fight, he doesn't do the typical thing. You know, we're used to seeing straight 1-2s come at us in striking class and not these big looping punches. And so you almost have to fight their fight in order to fight them for a little bit. And it's not like a boxing match where you have 3 minutes to kind of feel somebody out. At these Toughman contests, 1 minute per round, and then you get a minute break, 1 minute per round, get a minute break. And minutes not very long to try and figure out how somebody's going to fight. And then not only that, they have enough time that they can throw everything they got, and then they get a minute break.
Yeah.
And not that it's easy to come out for the third round and throw everything you have, but it's a little bit easier to do that than to try and do it for 3 minutes. You know, after about a minute, that's all you got, and then you got to go sit down, take a break. A boxer would have the opportunity in the second and third minute of a round to then, okay, I've weathered his storm. He's throwing everything at me, blew his wad. I can go in and start picking him apart. And so I think it does make it a little bit tougher for traditional fighters in that sense.
It does, and they don't always win. That's the thing. They do, I say a majority of the time, but not always. I've seen literally super tough bar fighters win a lot of times, right? But they were super tough bar fighters who just happened to have skill, whether they trained or not. It's a little bit different. They're very accurate. They're landing good punches, and they can kind of sprint and take a break because, like you said, it's a sprint for a minute. I've been around these fights since the '90s. I've trained people to fight in them. I have not fought. I had a choice in 1997. It was my first fight, and at that point, I had a choice. At that time, you had to pick: are you going to do Golden Gloves or are you going to do Toughman, right? And now it's a little different. You still kind of have to pick, but you could do a couple of Toughman fights and then still do amateur boxing. At that time, you were not allowed because here's the loophole, and it's kind of weird. If you were fighting for money, right? So it's a tournament for money, which kind of puts you in the semi-pro rankings, which ruins your amateur rankings, right? So if you're Golden Gloves, that's supposed to be 100% amateur, and guys that are just starting out are fighting. So at the time in the 90s, you literally had to pick, right? And I chose to pick what I wanted to because I was, which was Golden Gloves, but because I'm a taller fighter, so I keep people on the outside, kind of set up my punches, use my jab. It would be a lot harder in a Toughman because you get guys that just put their head down, put their head in your chest, and just throw haymakers, yes, left and right. And if you can't keep them off of you, you're not going to do well, right? And I had a friend. So just so people that don't know, I'm 6'6", around 240, right? I've got some length, I've got some size, but it's also hard because if you get on the inside of me, what makes me special is not on the inside, right? And for example, my friend George Randolph, he was about 6'7", 260, 270. We both started about the same time. He chose to do Toughman. Because the other thing is, if you win 2 Toughman, I don't know if or Rough and Rowdy, I don't know if it's exactly the same now, but then you have to turn pro because now you've won money, and you can't.
I believe that's correct. I'm pretty sure that's right.
And that kind of puts you in an awkward situation because you've essentially fought people off the street, maybe for 2 fights, and so maybe you had 5 or 10 fights with, quote unquote bums, right? Not to disparage anybody, but those are not real fighters. Now you have to turn pro. That's like a steep thing. So like when I looked at it and when I laid it out, I was like, man, this is not the road that I want to go. I want to have a good amateur career. I maybe have I mean, there's amateurs that have 100 fights in boxing, right? And then turn pro, and you can kind of polish your skills and do something. And that's the route I chose. My friend George, who's the exact same size as me, he chose the other. He proceeded to win the Clarksburg Toughman, and actually had a hard time. He did well, and but then after he won the Clarksburg Toughman, you know what his second fight was? He was in Pride 2, the Pride, the one that was bigger than UFC. So
Yeah.
that's a steep chart. You know, he went from winning Clarksburg Toughman to fighting in Japan in Pride, and he fought a guy, I think his name was Giorgio Tasaka or something. I'm gonna butcher his name, but he was a 5-time world kickboxing champion, and we kind of buttered up his records that looked a little bit better. But you know, George fought. He literally won a Clarksburg Toughman. Then he's fighting in Japan on a world stage, and he's in to this day. He's in video games and stuff. But he lost the fight. He did good. He's a tough guy. But that was kind of my point. Like George would have been better off if he kind of seasoned himself and got ready and did some stuff. Now look, he was a great tough guy and he did well. But it's interesting. That's the choice you have to make for people that don't know. It's weird, right? We kind of assume everybody knows what that is, but quite honestly, we're one of the few states where this is a thing. For good or for better or worse, I guess is the point. I do think there's value in it. I'm like all this stuff. I'm not trashing it. For the people like Mark, and for the people that I've trained that went on to other things, and whether you call them better things or not better things, it's a hell of it. It's a great experience, right? It's a great, and I'm sure Seth from your gym would agree, right? Because they're training real boxers and real fighters as well. This is just a different thing. It's a different avenue. You got guys that you probably want to groom and make Golden Gloves fighters, and Seth probably has some guys that he was like, look, man, you'd be great in this tough man thing, you know?
Yeah, well, and we've talked about them. We've got, listen, some guys want to be fighters, and some guys just want to be tough hillbillies, and we're okay with both of them. We love them all. You know, they don't have it. There's no dreams about becoming Canelo or Floyd Mayweather. But there is a dream like going to Parkersburg and beating the snot out of a couple West Virginians and making a grand. So for those guys, it's perfect. It's a perfect opportunity to and you know, sometimes you just kind of want to test. Maybe I don't look at boxing because this is the way I look at it. I don't look at boxing as something that I'm ever going to be a boxer and go professional or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I would love the opportunity to get into a boxing ring with another guy just to see what it feels like, where we're not pulling punches. He's not giving me 50%, 60% punches, and it's a gym spar. And granted, gym spars can kind of get out of hand sometimes, but it doesn't usually end up in a fight. So it would be nice to test myself and find out what's it feel like when somebody really wants to beat the piss out of me.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, right? And that's a good way to frame it if you have somebody that's doing it and say, hey, like, you don't think you're gonna be an amateur boxer working your way through Golden Gloves to potentially become a pro boxer, and blah blah blah. Because this is another good avenue to, like, just because you do a couple of these fights doesn't mean you couldn't do MMA, right? In the way I was looking, there wasn't MMA back in 1997. There was, but it wasn't like it is now. There was not a clear path to do whatever. So in 1997, my choice was like, well, I think I need to do this choice to become a pro boxer, which will lead me to this. It's a little bit different. Nowadays, I think you could, and I'm sure, and I'm positive actually, like I don't know the names, but a ton of guys that fight the UFC have won Toughman. You know what I mean? Like they've kind of went through the ranks. And that's a great point. Like if you got a guy in your gym that's just a slugger, street fighter, Toughman's a great opportunity. Rough and Rowdy is a great opportunity. They're one and the same for people that don't know. Very similar style, but you're going to win $1,000 and get experience. You're going to have at least one fight the first night. It's a 2-day tournament. So Friday you fight, you got to win your chance to go to step 2. And then step 2, you could have 5 or 6 fights, you know, if nobody signs up 2 or 3, but typically 5 or 6 fights. This thing goes for a long time. And look, it's especially when you're watching your friends. I'm sure when you watch Mark, it's fun. It really is fun, right? Again, you know, what I was saying earlier is when you don't know anybody, it's just not my cup of tea. But when my friends are in it, man, it is fun. And I don't care if my friend's fighting in front of 7-Eleven. I like to watch my friend fight, right? It's the same thing.
And a lot of these are 7-11 fights with 16-ounce gloves.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. Well, I'm glad that Mark did. I saw on another note too. One of the guys that I came up with in boxing, and we were under the same coach, which is Leon Ramsey, who's also the athletic commissioner over West Virginia now. So he was over that event. But Mike Shepard, his gym looked like they won the majority of those. So also for people that know, you win $1,000 and you win a jacket. So you get to wear this jacket around that says, "I'm the toughest man in whatever West Virginia, of 2021." So if you want to wear that around and have somebody start a fight with you, you can. It's a cool thing. But I won the same jacket in Golden Gloves. So it was 1997 Golden Gloves champion, and I wore that jacket a couple of times until I almost got in some fights in the street. I decided to quit wearing the jacket. But so congrats to Mike Shepard, who used to kick my ass in the 90s and probably still would. He's a great guy, and apparently his gym in Parkersburg is doing really well. So congrats to those guys and girls that fought, because it looked like, I think they won four of the championships of all those weight classes. So that's it's amazing. And there's some good gyms in Parkersburg. I mean, and Sam's gym's not too far. I know it's Glasgow, but it's not too far from that area. I don't know who all's left in Parkersburg. Ryan Carroll, obviously our friend, but quite a few people. So that's impressive. But speaking of those fights, whether you have something to finish up with that, but what did you think? Now you're the one guy out of both of us that watched UFC. I'll admit that I just watched the highlights, but I do have a couple of interesting stories I can add to the UFC. But what did you think of the fights this weekend?
So I actually kind of caught up on them today because I was a Toughman last night. So I watched a little bit of it last night, and then I caught up on most of it today. Watching mostly the fights that were my favorite fighters. I was going to start with Angela KGB Lee. She fought Shevchenko's sister, Anastasia Shevchenko, and the first round, she won the first round pretty convincing. Angie did won the first round convincingly, but the second round there was a takedown and it transitioned, and with 4 minutes on the clock, she had locked up a triangle but couldn't finish it, and she was in the triangle for the best part of 4 minutes. There was like, I want to say 6 seconds on the clock, and she finally caught her with an armbar from the triangle. But it made me think, because if she didn't get the armbar at that round, she had triangle locked up for 4 minutes. That's an awful lot of time to be in a triangle. And I don't know if a minute rest between rounds is enough to come back out. So
a little rough. Yeah. You have a little less blood in your head, huh?
Yeah. So it was amazing that she stuck with it as long as she did. I mean, she was peppering her with elbows and stuff, but no real big hammers to like knock her out or really take anything out of her for the next round. And it made me wonder, because there have been times where I've had triangles locked up and wasn't able to finish the triangle and felt like, man, I probably ought to give this up because my legs are going to be dead and I'm not going to be able to do anything. So I don't know. What is your feeling on holding on to submissions that aren't submissions, especially something like a triangle that is, if they've got decent triangle defense, or maybe you don't have the proper angle and they're not stopping you, like how long do you hold on to it? Obviously she did it long enough because she got the armbar submission out of it, but where would you be?
No, that's a good point. I think as a heavyweight, and we've talked about this a few times, like, for example, I'm not a headhunter, meaning that I don't go for guillotines and stuff like that. And the reason is, early on, and maybe I'm better at them now, and maybe I should go for them more, but I would run into a lot of times where I was going for guillotines and missing them, and then my arms were gassed. And if it was an MMA round, as soon as they popped out of the guillotine, then I was getting smashed, right? Which you see in the UFC a lot. Like, people go for guillotine, they kind of blow their wad, as we say. Their arms are gassed, and all of a sudden they're having to defend, and it's hard to defend when you're tired. You can't move your arms. And the same in several triangles. I'm one of those guys. We were actually talking about this at the gym today. I'm built well to where I'm long and lanky, and I can catch triangles from everywhere. The problem with this sometimes is it's hard to finish them. Now, luckily, if I'm with a heavyweight, their mass and their body type makes up for the lack of musculature in my legs and all that stuff. Like their shoulders and stuff start choking themselves. However, if I go with, which is oftentimes the gym and lower weight classes, there's some big gaps right in that big giant triangle that I have. So what I've just determined over the years is that not to blow my wad in those things and save my energy, right? However, it's weird. It's because it's one of those things that I don't know what it's like to not be 240 pounds. I've been 240 pounds or higher. I've been up to 330 pounds in my life. I've been a giant heavyweight. The lowest I've ever gotten is 205, cutting weight, but I'm naturally a big guy, which means my tank is just not, those little guys that can run a submission and hold a submission and blow their arms out and get that lactic acid build up and then just kind of recover in a minute and come back, right? I'm not that guy. And so because of that, I know my limitations and I'd have to let go of stuff. I just do, right? So I guess my thing is if I had a triangle, and again, I didn't see the fight, but I know if I had a triangle, I would be looking for arm bars or Kimuras out of the situation with the free arm. I'd keep the triangle, but I wouldn't be putting all I had into squeezing my legs and doing all that because I know it may be futile. That also being said, it also matters with the amount of time in a round, right? If there's 10 seconds left and I know there's 10 seconds, then I'm going to put everything I got into that 10 seconds and hope for the best,
Well, and I was going to say, that's kind of what I was surprised is that after she figure forward the standard triangle way, there were a couple times where she went for an armbar, but it didn't seem like there was any interest. And I don't know if you ever use it. A lot of times if people wrap the leg with the arm in, they'll wrap the leg. So if my arm is inside the triangle, my arm is inside the triangle, they will wrap the leg to the outside. And when they do that, rather than keeping the figure four on this side, I will switch my figure four. That way I can take my body over and start Kimuring. And it just didn't seem like she had any interest in changing anything. She was going to squeeze until she couldn't squeeze no more. And like I said, ultimately it panned out because she was able to get the arm bar. But I was just, the risk reward, especially like not getting the submission until 6 seconds left in the round. You get up and you got to walk around. It's not easy to walk anymore. Your legs are dead. And now you can't really punch if your legs aren't working. Yeah. So I don't know. It seemed like a lot of risk for holding on to it and not transitioning to something else. And I think that was the thing that surprised me more than anything is like because Angela Lee, she's pretty good jiu-jitsu. I know I want to say she trained at Helsing Gracie in Texas somewhere or something like that. So I know she's been in the game and I've heard her name for ages, going back to like before she was even in Invicta. And so I just thought she would have had more options jiu-jitsu wise and she didn't use them.
Yeah, I would say arguably as a coach, we recognize those situations, both of us being a coach, right? We've told people we can express that maybe that's an area that she didn't think about, or she really thought if she put everything she had into it, she's going to finish it, right? It's tough. Like, because when your adrenaline's flowing and you're in those situations, your mind's going to tell you certain things, right? Maybe she was like, man, I've got this. Like, I just got to go for it. And arguably it could have been the wrong decision. But going off that, let's think about two things that I heard today and that I talked about. Like one, first of all, talking about this fight, for all those people that said women shouldn't be fighting, one of the people that they were talking about, Stephen A. Smith today, that said, look, I don't like watching women fight. I don't think women should fight. I would argue that some of the best fights I've ever seen in my whole life were with women, 100%. Like Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey was the first one that, the second one and the first one. But those fights put MMA on the map for women's MMA. And then you talk about Rose and all of her fights. And I almost always, when you put some women on the card, they steal the show. Do you agree? I mean, it's not always, but most of the time.
I thought it happened at the Toughman last night when I was at the Toughman. There was a school nurse fighting some other girl, and they were the two. The nurse took a bludgeoning. It was rough for 2 rounds, but then in the 3rd round, she had absorbed it. The other girl had spent everything that she had. Her gas tank was empty, and then she starts firing back. And those two went at it. granted, it was only 3 minutes, but it was the best 3 minutes of boxing that I've seen all night. So and me and my wife, we've gone to a lot of shows, a lot of local events. We've been lucky enough to go to a couple UFCs, and in all of those, anytime the women fight, I was talking to a woman fighter one time, and I said, what is the difference between like women fighting and men fighting? Why do the women seem, because they do just seem much more aggressive than what men fighters? It seems, not that it's not, but it seems that regularly men are somewhat more calculated than what the women are. There's a measuring, there's a period of feeling each other out, and women just get in and bang, and they don't wait. And I asked a woman fighter about that, and she said, guys are fighting a lot of times for pride, and women, when they fight, a lot of times they fight for life. They don't know, like she said, every woman that I've ever fought, like when I get in there and fight, I'm fighting to stay alive. I'm not fighting. And then you think about like the best UFC fighters or the best MMA fighters, and a lot of those guys are like, yeah, I was willing to die. I was ready to die. You've talked about it. Like, if you don't have that mentality, like this is for life and death, then you pull punches a little bit, and you're a little more measured, and you're a little more calculated. And I think that might be part of it, is that that this is a fight for life, where men are fighting for pride.
Yeah, and here's one thing I used to think, and I have no way of knowing if this is true or not. And so a woman could correct me, and maybe she can or cannot. But here's what I used to think, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I used to think, much like if I watched like this is not going to sound right, so maybe I'll put it surrogate. But if I watch two kids go at against, and again, I'm not comparing women to kids, but this is what I think of when I watch two younger kids go against. Sometimes I feel like they don't hit hard enough to really rock the other person, so they can go harder, more aggressive, and have a higher volume of punches, right? If I put my 5-year-old with another 5-year-old, in fact, some podcasts I've listened to, Joe Rogan's kind of talked about this, because they had some kids sparring or fighting, and he was like, man, they should take the headgear off because they can't really hurt each other, and that way they can go. And that's what he means by that. And I used to say that with the women, which is not the truth, because we all know Amanda Nunes probably knocked out a lot of men, clearly, right? But I do think a lot of times in general, the punches aren't having the damage behind them that the men's punches are having. And I know this is going to sound kind of controversial, and I don't mean it to be sexist or controversial, because again, it's not always the case. Because again, if Amanda Nunes or Holly Holm or some of these guys have hit you or kicked you, it's gonna be lights out. But how many times have we seen some women stand toe to toe and land bomb after bomb, and they're still standing there? I would think on paper, maybe the reason you don't see that happen with men as much is because the consequences are a little bit higher. Meaning that especially with us, meaning heavyweights, and this is universal with heavyweights, this is why the heavyweight division changes so much, and why a person like Stipe was considered one of the best ever, and it's only because he had 5 title defenses, because the title changes hands a lot, because all you have to do is catch a person one time and they're sleeping. And so therefore, maybe they're a little bit more timid and calculated because they can't take that risk, where women will stand toe to toe and just bomb each other and kick and punch, and they're still standing there, right? And again, I'm not a woman, so it's more anecdotal evidence for watching something on TV, and I can see some people do this, and I don't see it as much in women or as much as in men. And when we do see it, like an Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward thing, that's why it's elevated to another level, because you don't see it that often with men. And that's why to this day, people talk about the Arturo Gatti Ward fight, the trilogy, because they stood in front of each other and did what women do on a nightly basis, right? Like, that's how I look at it. And again, I'm not a woman, so I can't say when I fought a man, it felt like this way, and when I fought a woman, it felt like, I don't know. But just looking at it on the outside, that would be my kind of guess. I don't, what's your thoughts on that?
I would say that there's definitely that probably plays a factor. It has to play a factor. And just, we were talking, that was something we were talking about weight classes last night. I've got a kid who trains with me who's maybe 120 pounds, and he's 15, and he can hit me as hard as he wants. And I'm not going to say that it feels good.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. It sucks. When he hits me as hard as he wants, it sucks. And he's caught me clean a couple times. But when he hits me, he's still only hitting me with 115, 120 pounds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't have to throw that hard to hit him with the same force that he hits me with because I'm twice his weight. And so the consequence, like you said, that's the reason we have weight classes, because the consequences why rises, the weight rises. Because when I swing my arm, I'm not swinging with my arm. I'm swinging with my push off of the earth and then the 230 pounds that I push behind it. And so it changes the way the punch is going to land. Even if he punches as hard as he can and moves, he can move the earth with his feet and hit me, and he still only got the launch of 115 pounds behind.
Yeah, and again, it's not a knock on anybody. So think of all the Floyd Mayweather fights that we've all watched, and how many people has he knocked out, right? Again, he's a defensive boxer, but that's why some of the people at lightweight stand out higher or more than others, because like a guy like Canelo that hits a guy in the face and his face explodes like the other night, that's impressive because that doesn't happen that often. Right? Most of those guys hit each other, and it takes a volume of punches to knock a guy out, not just one punch, right? If Mike Tyson hits you with one punch, you're going to go out. It's usually going to take Floyd Mayweather, just like he did with McGregor, to kind of wear him down after several rounds and then hit him with a flurry, a volley of punches to knock him out. It's not usually the one case. Now, look, again, everybody can say Kamaru Usman knocked out Jorge Masvidal with one punch. He's 170 pounds. Again, yes, I get it. Right, it happens, but in general, right?
I would always turn back to somebody like Julio Cesar Chavez.
Yes.
Now he's got a ton of knockouts, but how many of them were in the first 5 rounds?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. They weren't in the first 5 rounds. He spent the first 5 to 6 rounds destroying guys' bodies. That way they would put their hands down, and now the head is just a beach ball on a tee, and then he would beat on the head. But it would take him 6 rounds to wear the body down, and then he could go up to the head and start headhunting a little bit. But when he's punching his big pillows into the other guy's pillows who's got his hands up, he's not going to knock him out in the first 3 rounds of the fight, because, and not that he was a small, but he wasn't a heavyweight,
So. And to that point, he's fighting Anderson Silva soon, right? In June.
Who is?
Junior.
Oh, Junior in a boxing match?
Yes, yeah, in June. And Senior's fighting that night as well. I think he's fighting Hector Camacho Jr. that night as well, which is odd. Look,
that is odd.
Yes, this is a weird time for fighting. Since Jake Paul and Logan Paul came out, now's the time to just throw in anybody. Which, look, I'm not against, actually. I am one of the guys that watched. I watched the last Jake Paul versus Askren fight, even though I knew what was going to happen. I watched it. I was also disappointed that I tuned in for a terrible hip hop concert. You know what I'm saying, for the most part. But I am also entertained. Like it is what it is. They try to go outside the box and do some things that mix music with boxing. I don't think the production value is there, but the fightings when they happen, I was generally entertained. Right. I don't know about you, but it was generally. It doesn't take. If we're going to Toughman, it doesn't take much to entertain me.
Right? I'm a boy and I like fights. And so if it doesn't matter if it is in front of 40,000 people or in Madison Square Garden, or if it's in the backyard and a couple of kids are settling issues, like I like a fight. So I want to watch people. I remember for the longest time, the only thing I would watch on YouTube would be like backyard fights or schoolyard fights or girl fights and all that stuff.
Did you watch, which is sad, and don't judge us for this, but did you watch bum fights or felony fights?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I watched all of it. And a big part of it, I gotta close the thing here. Apologies. Popped up on my screen. I think the thing that I liked about it was that it was real, right? Like it's a real fight at that point. You got 2 guys who, and the bum fights obviously is a little more controversial, but like a lot of the regular street fights that I watch, like 2 guys having a disagreement, they both got out of their car, they gave each other the finger, and now they need to settle it with their fists, but neither of them really know what they're doing. And you get to see what a real fight looks like when
Yeah.
people don't know what's going on. And it made jujitsu more important, and learning a little bit about striking more important, because I don't want to be one of those guys.
Well, and last time I was in a street fight, a lot of people asked, right? Since we're trainers, but last time I was in a street fight was like 15 years ago. Luckily, I haven't been in any since. But the same thing, like you get so mad. I was so mad at the guy that I didn't think about I train every day, right? And I did not think about training. I was throwing haymakers like a tough man. And it wasn't until he decked me straight in the chin, which luckily, that I must have a good chin, but it hit me where enough to where it woke me up. And I said, man, he just hit me. And then it reminded me, why are you not doing what you do every day? And so then I shot in and I took him down and destroyed him. And it was actually funny because it's like once we hit the ground, I was like laughing because it was so easy. I literally laughed in the guy's face. Like I was like doing something and I was like kind of just smiling. And then the guy said something to me while I was hitting him, and I said, well, I think he said, why are you laughing? And I said, because you're about to get destroyed or something, like I think I Neon Belly, but it went from, I got so mad, we're trading punches, and quite honestly, maybe he got the better of me on the feet. I don't know, because it's such a blur. I'm throwing as hard as I can, and then I got hit, and I was like, oh shit, the guy can actually hit back. Like, I didn't know. I was just, in my mind, I thought I was just going to kill everybody, like a dream, right? Like you have a dream. I'm like, here's my dream. I'm like, wham, wham, wham. And then all of a sudden, hey, he's fighting back. And then my training took over. But it is also like you said, like why I like to watch fighting, because that's what I train every day as normal day people, in case we get into these fights. And it's interesting because I say a lot of things, and I need to have reference. So if I say, hey, it's a blur, and once you fight, 50% of your game goes out the window, and you're gonna do stupid shit, and you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. It's good to have that in my mind. It may have been 15 years ago, but it's better than me saying every day, like, hey, this is what happens. I've never gotten in a fight, right? And especially a street fight. MMA fight's still different because it's a sport. Even though it's two skilled people, we're still fighting within a time limit, a scoring system. We're doing certain things to make things work, right? We're not just staying on the ground or, whatever it is, biting, there's something different, right?
We had this exact conversation this morning. I said, MMA is nice because we get to see what two highly trained guys can do when it is what we think of as a fair fight, right? Like if the universe was perfect and two guys had an altercation with each other, they would say, hey, let's take this outside. And then they would have agreed upon combat where it would be like UFC rules. But that was the other thing, is like, that's not necessarily a real fight, because we don't know if this fight is, hey, you're a jerk, you did this thing to make me mad, and we got to go outside and it's just me and you, or hey, you're a jerk, we need to go outside, but then you bring three buddies and a knife.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the variables outside of a cage are huge that we don't necessarily always, and sure, some of it will do knife defense or something like that, but the best defense against a knife or a gun is to give them all of your things and then go home and tell the cops.
Nobody wants to hear that, but that's the truth, right? I actually had a guy come in the gym today and said, what do you guys do for weapons defense? And I was like, look, if it's basic, we do some certain things. And I was honest with him. I said, hey, in gun defense, we do certain things, but typically if you have a gun, you should get the hell out of there. Do what they said. If a knife fighter comes and he's got the blade in his hand facing down, not up, that means he's a knife fighter. You need to get the hell out of there. We've got some basic things. Now, it doesn't mean if you're put in a corner that you can't do those things. So you're going to have to. However, if somebody goes to rob me and they pull a gun or a knife, and I think I'm just going to do something in defense to save my wallet, right? There's a time and a place. Look, every situation is different, but at certain times, like even the toughest guy should just give up his wallet or whatever and live to fight another day, not risk getting shot or his wife getting shot or put in a bad situation. And look, and I don't know, unless you're put in a million of the situations, when you can choose when was the right time to do that, when was the wrong time to do that. We never know. And that's actually why we go every day in self-defense. And to that point, also besides the weapon thing, it's another thing we talked about today is that, like, I have a self-defense class on Sundays at 2:00. And a guy happened to come in today that was checking out class, but he came late. He came about like 2:15. by that time I was like, hey, like looks like nobody knew's coming. So I was having my guys just basically MMA spar because they're experienced, right? And so when he came at 215, he was like, hey, this is not the self-defense class, because it was like people are beating the shit out of each other. And I said, well, it is, but I didn't know you're coming. So here's what's the difference. And so what I try to explain to him is, if it's self-defense, we're training for the street. We train for haymakers and unorthodox things like the Toughman. We
Right.
wouldn't Muay
It,
Thai bar each other, you know.
right. And that's another thing is like, hey guys, this move is for the typical response.
Yes.
Right. I'm not training you to say, hey, this is going to work against a D1 wrestler. I'm not training you to this is going to work against a guy who is a legit Muay Thai guy. This is the typical asshole at the bar who doesn't know anything, got too drunk and came at you.
But you can still be dangerous.
Yes, could still be dangerous.
Yeah, you've got to protect your chin, look for the right haymaker, and go from there, right? Like, and look for the sucker punch and all those. And those guys, look, they're throwing from the fences. If you screw up and they connect, they're throwing from the fences. Like, it's gonna jack you up, right? And that's the thing. So first and foremost, guard that freaking haymaker. Look for the freaking haymaker. But then again, at the same time, if I assume everybody's going to throw a haymaker, and nowadays everybody trains and he throws a 1-2 straight punch, 1-2-3. Look, you got to be ready for everything, right? It's the thing. You can't say I'm ready for a street fight and he didn't throw a haymaker, and that's bullshit. That's not fair. That's not what I trained for. It's a little bit of everything. So 90% of the time we train for the haymakers. There's also a reason I'm sure you're the same, Gary. I argue there's a reason you see more haymakers, even with experienced fighters. When I just said 15 years ago, I got in a fight, I was throwing haymakers. Let me tell you why. It's because you typically stand square up because you don't want to tell the other person what you're doing. So we're standing square to square, feet side by side, and we're pushing each other, talking shit. And then somebody decides they're going to throw a sucker punch. And it has to come from a haymaker. In order to generate power, it's got to come from the hip and come from the side. It's got to be a hooking, looping punch. And at that point, then you can switch your style. But even the most experienced guys are typically going to throw a haymaker at that point, because like, I'm not walking up to you in my fight stance with my hands up, because that's going to tell you what I'm going to do. And then, I mean, like, that's kind of how that goes. And you also don't know if you're going to, like, if you and I were in a confrontation, I am going to try to talk it down, because I fight every day. Like, I know what the consequences are. So I'm like, hey man, let's calm down. And then you push me, I push you. And then somewhere in the midst of it, somebody throws a punch and we've got to react off that punch. Right. Self-defense, real life situations are way different than MMA. They can't be confused, right? They literally can't. But anyway, let me tell you what. Let's get off that for a second. I wanted to bring this up because you're talking about this triangle with the women fight. Again, I haven't watched any of the fights, so you can tell me. However, and you probably know what I'm going to say, I heard that somebody's arm got snapped in a similar thing. I'm assuming Tony Ferguson and somebody. Tell me about.
So Jacare had a fight. Yeah,
you're right.
Which, yeah, I've got it wrote down here as something I want to talk about. So there was a transition that the guy sort of had his back, and then transition kind of rolled over into an arm bar, and it sounded like somebody had bit into a piece of celery.
Terrible.
Yeah. I mean,
you don't know, that is the movie sound effect for a lot of stuff, is cracking celery. Honestly,
is it okay? Well, I guess I could have been a Foley artist then, because that's what it sounded like to me when I watched it back, and it sounded like somebody like snapped a piece of broccoli. So snapped a piece of celery.
So this will be good, because explain to me what happened, because I didn't see it. And let's say that some people listen to this haven't seen it. What exactly happened?
So there was a transition where Jacare's back was sort of taken. Now, it wasn't like hooks in and set up, but the guy was starting to roll off, but he rolled over, kind of like stepped over and had the arm bar. And now I need to rewatch it to make sure that I'm correct. But because now it's from memory and it's from last night when I was a little bit tired. But he had transitioned like kind of almost like a belly down armbar. Yeah. And then Jacare sort of defended, and in the defense, Yeah, so he had the back, but he only had one hook in, and the leg was kind of across the stomach. Jacare's pulling him over the top. As he gets pulled over the top, he steps over for the arm bar. Now, the arm, when we think of arm bar, we think of arm bar coming towards the chest. But as he was stepping over, the arm was actually tucked under his arm. And so when he rolls through, he has kind of the arm tucked under his armpit, and he was able to finish the arm bar there, but it broke. So the guy didn't go completely belly down. He was sort of on his side, and then was able to get hip pressure into it to finish the armbar. And then Jacare is standing there holding his arm, like, yeah, this is what happens when you don't tap soon enough.
Did it break at the elbow? Like they were arguing about it today at the gym. Did it break at the elbow or the forearm? Do you think?
If I had to guess, it was probably either high forearm or elbow, but I don't know.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
Yeah, for the people. So this week, I had my elbow dislocated. Did you see that, Gary? By the way,
I heard about that, but we hadn't talked about it since.
Yeah, so I was holding pads for my wife teaches kickboxing, kind of cardio class, but it's for men and women, and it's fighters go and everything. But anyway, I was holding pads, kickboxing pads for a gentleman. I was trying to have him leg kick me. He missed the pad and kicked me right above the elbow, and so it pushed my humerus in. So I was holding the pad basically like this on my elbow, kicked me right here, pushed the humerus in, my elbow popped out. So I had a dislocated elbow. It did not feel good. For a half hour, I had to cuss and bite my tongue. And the way that I work is I don't, like if I told you I'm going to hold mitts, I'm going to hold mitts. So, I just walked around in a circle and cussed, and then I mitts for everybody. So that kind of worked. And then that night I was in pain. I was contemplating whether I need to go have an x-ray, go to the ER or whatever. And then I got lucky. I just drank a couple beers and had my wife pulling my arm and popped it back in socket. So it's perfectly fine. It reminds me of, and obviously it's not the same because I haven't talked to her, but Misha Tate and Ronda Rousey, I know she dislocated her elbow and it looked horrible because her arm folded in half. And she did have lasting, I think she had some tendon and ligament problems, and she had some other things, and it was a little bit worse than mine. But so far, so good. I'm good on that. But what makes me think, again, I didn't see the fight, but what makes me think of Frank Mir, Tim Sylvia, when he broke his forearm in half, and it was freaking disgusting. It was one of the worst. Look, we know, like, I see this every day, and we talk about it. Like if somebody doesn't tap, you're going to break the arm. And look, there's a different thing, especially, like when you get in the UFC, it's different, right? Because now it is the Super Bowl, and you are fighting for money, and you're fighting for life and death, and that's probably the things that are going through your mind. You're going to break somebody's arm, but man, as practitioners like you and I, Gary, and as coaches, and even though we talk about it, it's one of those things I still hate to see and hate to hear. And I know it's an inevitable thing if somebody doesn't tap and it's their fault. And I didn't see it. I don't know if it's somebody that just didn't tap or if it just happened. Freaking crazy though, right? It's just freaking crazy. And especially, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the Jacare that I know, the world legend jiu-jitsu practitioner? Yes, that's even crazy. So where did this guy come from? Am I lost? Where did he come from? How did he beat the legendary Jacare and snap his arm in half? Like, what happened here?
Well, I mean, going back and watching the whole fight, but he was just, I gotta find the name because I'm terrible with names. Let's see. He kind of pieced him up from what I remember. And so Jacare's hands have never been great, but
they've gotten better.
They've gotten better, but they've never been great. He's still a grappler. Prelim card. Andre Muniz.
So Mike Dias, who's been on the podcast before, he told me that he talked a lot of shit beforehand, saying that Jacare didn't know what he was going into, and his jiu-jitsu sucked, and these are Mike Dias words. I don't know if it's true or not. And so he was saying, he was adding on to the story. So then not only did he say that, he made good on his word. So again, I'm hearing secondhand information. So if this really happened,
Yeah, I don't know about him trash talking beforehand. Uh, all I know is like it when it came to the grappling section of it, it seemed like Jacare just made a really bad like tactical error. He was trying to pull him over top of his head, and then as he pulled him over top of the head, the guy went belly down armbar, and he would as you're pulling him over, if you keep the hips close to the shoulder, it's a pretty easy armbar to hit. So be it that you get a good squeeze on the arm with your knees. And Jacare just didn't respect it, or he was hurt from taking a punch, or who knows. But
that's what I'm going to say. In your estimation, again, going off memory, do you think it's a tactical error, or do you think it's a softening from punches earlier? Don't know.
I think it's probably soft. I think it's more a softening from earlier, probably.
Yeah, and people need to keep that in mind. Sometimes people say, well, Jacare Jiu-Jitsu is not that good or blah, blah, blah. But you got to remember, when we add in punches, now we're talking about maybe a scrambled brain, a tired person, right? Even in straight jiu-jitsu, if I mount somebody, knee on belly somebody, side body somebody, and just really wear them out, make them start to want to breathe, they're going to make mistakes that they wouldn't make because they're not. Doesn't mean they're not good at jiu-jitsu. It just means that I've made them make mistakes because they're tired, right? So maybe that's what happened. But interesting. It blew my mind. Like I said, again, I haven't seen the fight, so but what caused us to have this conversation was Charles Oliveira, and let's kind of get into that. So tell me about that fight. So I did see Sports Center posted a video today that said a tale of two rounds, and they showed the first round of Chandler kind of whipping Charles' ass and looking like he was not ready to get finished, and then all of a sudden they showed the second round, which was the complete opposite. So how'd that?
So the beginning of the first round, Oliveira was actually shot in on a double and was like passing, started to do some stuff. They ended up scrambling. I think they got back up, and then Chandler was able to get on top and deliver a lot of damage. A lot of damage at the end of the first round, probably in the last 2 minutes or so. Was able to do a lot of damage from at one point it was like half guard and then transition to like he was standing and they were kind of in like a foot on hip and he had a De La Hiva heel grab. It at one point he almost went like up onto his side to go like De La Hiva and lace the leg across. But it was kind of that. And then he came back. Chandler comes back down into the guard. There were some more punches, a lot of hammer fisting, trying to make space to do damage. And I'm pretty sure he cut open Oliveira on the eye, but it wasn't anything significant. I know he was cut. I can't remember if it was on the eye or if it was on the cheek. Second round, they come out, and Oliveira just came with a big punch, and it landed clean. And he was able to get on top of him. Kind of got into that like half turtle where the guy's up against the cage. So it's not like he's kind of had his back against the wall so that his back couldn't be taken. So not really turtle, but he was down so he couldn't get kneed. And Oliveira just came over and peppered him, and that was kind of the end of it.
Well, and so that kind of leads me to the story, which I don't think you've heard today, but we talked about the gym today, and I don't know if you saw my post on Facebook, but around 2010, 2011, just so you know, I think it's kind of a fun story, but that's when we were trying to make MMA legal in West Virginia, right? It was around 2010, 2011. And the UFC was heavily involved in Zuffa and all those guys. And anyway, so obviously we were successful because MMA is legal in all 50 states. And so one of the things as a thank you, they were like, hey, man, like, thank you for helping us make MMA legal in West Virginia. And just so people know, West Virginia and New York were the only two states in the entire United States where MMA was illegal at all. And the most important thing was making MMA legal in New York so they could do events at the Madison Square Garden. Nobody cared about West Virginia. There's never been an event in West Virginia, but it helped to say, hey, it's legal in all 49 states except for New York, right? So it was a precursor for that. But anyway, we went through some battles and some fights here, and I was kind of the grassroots effort that helps make MMA legal here in West Virginia. And as a gift, the UFC took me to Pittsburgh and gave me an all-access tour and pass to whatever I wanted to do basically at the UFC that was in Pittsburgh. And this was around 2010, 2011. And I could also invite everybody that I wanted to. So unfortunately, Garry, you and I were not friends at the time, so you were not on the list. But I took about 10 or 11 people, just random people too. It was weird. So they gave us all the best seats you can imagine. And then at a certain point, Dana White, some of the UFC officials, Mark Ratner, a couple other guys, without name dropping, just came and got myself and my wife and said, "Hey, let's go in the back." And so we did some backstage things and went into the locker rooms of some fighters, went into the actual trailer that was streaming the UFC, shooting into the satellite, doing the pay-per-view, and on and on and on. Literally the best you can ask for. So one of the things they did when they came and got me, it was me and Lisa, my wife. They took us to Charles Oliveira's locker room. So he was a nobody at that time in 2010, 2011. And actually, to be honest with you, it was kind of rude for him. I'll just be honest. He was getting ready to fight. He was pacing back and forth, as fighters do. They're getting ready, focusing on the floor, staring at the floor, talking to himself, pacing back and forth. And one of the lawyers for the UFC grabbed him by the hand and said, "Hey, I want you to meet Butch Hiles here." And he's like literally getting ready to go out for his fight. So he doesn't give a flying fuck who I am or what's going on. So he doesn't even talk. He just kind of gives me the head nod that guys do. And I said, "Hey man, I'm sorry. They're bugging you." And so he goes on, and so his corner at the time was Manny Gambarian, I think is his name. Yeah. So he's one of the Ultimate Fighter guys, and I recognized him. I didn't know who Charles Oliveira was, but I said, "Hey," because I knew him from the Ultimate Fighter. So I waved at him, and he was, "Look, man, everybody's getting ready to go to the fight, so they're kind of in a bad mood, whatever." So the UFC executive at the time said, "Hey, how would you like to feel what it feels like to go out as a fighter in the UFC?" I was like, "Well, fuck. I mean, that sounds cool." So what they did is, as they announced Charles Oliveira, they announced him. They had me follow him about 10, 20 feet behind. So when the UFC is like, "Hey, now introducing from, I don't know where he's from, but let's say Sao Paulo, Brazil, Charles Oliveira." So they have him come out, and then about 10, 20 feet later, they have me come out. So then I get to pretend, as the crowd's yelling, I just raise my, what I'm saying? It's funny, but it's funny now for me, but I got to pretend I was the guy, and so it's cool. So at the time, I just looked it up today because I knew exactly who that was. I told my wife last night, I said, "That's the guy that we were in his locker room." And she, of course, my wife doesn't watch fight. She's like, "Whatever. I don't know what you're talking about." So I looked it up, and there he is. And I posted it on Facebook today, all the pictures, because I have pictures from exactly when they bothered his angry ass, where he's pacing back and forth. They literally grabbed him by the hand, pulled him towards me, said, "Here, Butch, this is Charles." So they meet him. He's like, "Shut the fuck up. I'm getting ready to fight." So we took a picture there. They call his name. They walk out. I walk 10, 20 feet behind him, announce his name. There's pictures of me holding my hands up. There's pictures of me taking pictures of him holding his hands up. And then afterwards, as I walk down the aisle, like it's me, which is really him, then the UFC ring card girls come and get me, and we take a picture together as well, which is hilarious, right? Like, it's very fun, but they were being so anybody that talks shit about the UFC, think of how nice they were to me. Like, this is like a dream come true for your average fan. Then, and on top of that, here's a funny story. Because they do this all for me, the entire crowd's watching this, and they're like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" So they see me. I'm 6'6", 240. At that time, I'm in a little bit better shape, so I'm kind of muscular. All of a sudden, the crowd is like wanting pictures with me left and right. So at first, I don't know what to do. I'm like, "You don't want a picture with me." And then I'm just like, "Fuck it." Like 20 people have asked me already. So I'm like, okay. So I'm just stopping, taking pictures with everybody, like nonstop, like every 4 feet I get stopped there. "Hey man, can I get a picture with you?" And then finally, I do this about 20 times. And finally somebody's like, "Who the hell is that?" And cause I'm waiting to hear what they say. And a guy happens to actually know me that got his picture with me. And he's like, that's Butch Hiles from Facebook, which I think's so fucking hilarious. Like, who's that? Like, I'm not something. I'm not even Butch Hiles. Like, what does that mean, And somebody was like, the look of disgust on their face, like, who the fuck's Butch Hiles from Facebook, right? It's like hearing Logan Paul from YouTube, which is very much more important than Butch Hiles from Facebook. I actually have no following, but it was hilarious. So I'm getting all these pictures, all this stuff. So the point is, which is a funny story. So today I was able to post all those pictures, which it's a decade later. And that's what, and they said, so that was in Pittsburgh. So apparently they fought in Pittsburgh last night. And so a decade later, he was 10-8 at that time, or maybe just starting, and he finished 10-8. And now he's winning a 9-0 run and became the UFC champion. So what they're saying is, look, man, just stick with it because you are a nobody. I didn't even know who he was. I was like, who's this guy? And I didn't know. I was more about the experience, which to this day is a great experience, right? But now, a decade later, I get to act like a superstar that, hey, I was in Charles Oliveira's room when he's getting ready for the UFC, and I was with the champ 10 years ago in the same arena, winning the UFC title, and it makes me look like a superstar. And of course, it makes him look like a superstar. But I will also say that was the greatest UFC fight I ever saw. Not his fight, but that was the Pat Barry Czech Congo fight for anybody that remembers it.
Oh, yes.
That was the main event where Pat Barry had Czech Congo on quote unquote queer street, as Joe Rogan would put it, where he was like skating on ice. And he went to finish him off, and Czech Congo knocked him out. And it was the best fight I ever saw in my life. I'm there, front row. Steelers coach, which whatever that guy's name is, anyway, Mike Tomlin. Me and him are high-fiving, hugging each other. This is how close, like the UFC literally treated, like me and Mike Tomlin are freaking hanging out. Then afterwards, me and Czech Congo are hanging out at the bar. This was the greatest night of my life 10 years ago. It's hard to remember, but it brings back good memories after I see Charles Oliveira win this. So nonetheless, I have a great, great story. And I can also say great things about the UFC. I know there's been terrible things going on, and I don't want to get into it with Diego Sanchez and all them. And Stephan Bonner is a good friend of mine. I've wrote him privately because I know he was in some of those videos with Diego. And just so you guys know, obviously they have a different side of the story. We've seen everything, and I'll be honest with you. For the videos I saw, I sided with the UFC for what I saw. But I will say this, that Stephan says there's a different side of the story. And actually, he's super nice. He's also saying nothing about the UFC whatsoever. He's just saying like, hey, there's some different sides, and he doesn't want to get involved. And the only reason I bring it up is because I saw him in the video. But for all the flack that they catch, I just want to say that they took this hillbilly from West Virginia and did all that stuff. I mean, literally, they didn't have to. They had no reason to do that. So I'm nobody. I'm still nobody. But they made that like I was a Make-A-Wish kid, right? That was something that if I was dying of cancer and I said, give me the best night of my life, that would be one of those things. I mean, and I mean that in all sincerity and a great thing. Those people did some amazing things. So I have nothing but great things to say about them. And that fight brings up some great memories. And anyway, it gives me a good story to talk about. Nonetheless, it's an amazing thing. So,
well, going back to like the Charles Oliveira, and we had talked about earlier, having a long amateur career, and having a long amateur career to set yourself up to go pro in boxing, and that doesn't really happen for a lot of MMA fighters. And I think that's something that we're starting to see that we didn't get to see is the opportunity to grow a fighter. A lot of MMA fighters and UFC fighters, they have 9 losses, 10 losses, 11 losses on their record before they get even close to sniffing a title fight. And it's because the amateurs is like, you have 2 fights, 3 fights, and you did great in all 3 of those fights. You need to make some money if you're going to be getting beat up like this. So they go right into him, and they turn pro and go into it. And so there's not the same grooming that you would have for a good amateur fighter.
Well, yeah, and you can argue for people that don't understand the difference in boxing, and I came from both. As I said, I joined Golden Gloves and went through the amateur ranks to do what boxing does. But the difference in boxing is, as we see, they like you to make 20, 25, 30 and 0 and put those guys together, make a marquee matchup that's going to make 200, 300 million. And groom those guys, right? And the difference is, and that's fine, right? That does make for a marquee matchup, and it makes for a fight that 1.5 or 100 million or 200 million people are going to buy, whatever the numbers are, right? We're all guilty of that, and they can also hype us up and say, hey, and like this fight, Michael Spinks and Mike Tyson is going to be an amazing fight. You guys need to watch it. It's over 90 seconds, right? They hype us up. The difference, and this also what we talked about at the gym today, is the UFC, where you got guys like Michael Chandler, for example. He just got in the UFC. Now he is obviously in Bellator and a champion of his own right, but a lot of people argued he shouldn't be in that position. And it was a hell of a fight, right? And vice versa. You've got some people that you're put in a position where their records, like a McGregor, I don't know what his record is, but it's not that great compared to Mayweather, right? But that's the thing with MMA. If you're good, they're going to make you fight. It's different. You can't hide. They don't allow you to hide. And sometimes they give you fights before you're ready, right? They're like, hey, you're pretty close. Let's fight. Like a GSP Matt Hughes, right? Like GSP Matt Hughes, number one. GSP made some tactical mistakes because he was nervous. He was arguably not ready for the spotlight. He lost the fight. They gave him, however long, a year or two, and he came back and dominated Matt Hughes and then continued his reign to maybe one of the best reigns of all time as an MMA. However, he got the shot before he was ready. And because of that, he made those tactical mistakes, but he's able to go on for his life and do something different. You don't see that in boxing. Boxing has a different model where they're going to fight you. Let's say that if Gary's the fighter, they're going to put you against a guy and they're going to test you. They're going to say, okay, maybe you're not so good on the inside. Let's give you a good inside fighter. Okay, you won that fight. You did a good job, but you're not so good with southpaws. Let's give you a southpaw. Okay, you did pretty good. You won with that guy. You're not so good with this. Let's give you this guy. And then by that time, you're 30 and 0. All right, you're ready for the championship. Now let's fight the championship. So now you lose to a guy like Mayweather. And now you're forgotten because you lost one fight. You're 25 and 1. Well, Gary's not so good. He's a fucking pussy, right? Boxing's different. It's weird, right? Like if you quit on the stool, like Roberto Duran, you're known in the history of boxing as no mas. Nobody even knows what no mas means except for us normal people. That means no more. And that means I quit, as in MMA. That happens every day, right? Like you say, hey man, I can't take it anymore. Let's go fight tomorrow. But if you did that in boxing, arguably even still today, it's a little bit more accepted because of MMA. But if you did that before, sometimes you're ostracized. Like Roberto Duran had a hard time. Like I said, to this day, he's known as the no mas fight. All he did is quit because arguably all he did is party up to that fight. He got too much money and whatever. But now, in MMA, you can quit, survive to go another day. You have to fight good people. It's two different things. And hopefully boxing, and it has been, it's getting more to where they're making that happen. However, look, we're seeing it in the heavyweight division. How hard is it for Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua to fight each other? They're having to break contact. Like Tyson Fury is probably going to get sued by Deontay Wilder for breaking a rematch clause after he beat a guy twice. You know what I'm saying? Like it's goofy. Just to fight the normal guy to like they can't unite the titles. It's so goofy, right? Like it's just. And we all love. Here's the misconception. I think people think that if you like MMA, you don't like boxing. If you like boxing, you don't like MMA. Like I'm a fight fan. I want to see everybody fight as long as it's a good fight. But I do want to see the best people fight each other. I don't want to see Canelo fight some bum off the street. I want to see Canelo fight the best when they're ready. I don't want to see him like. You could argue Mayweather fought some people and they wouldn't, he made them, like Pacquiao made them get certain steroid tests, or they did this, did that. Like, there's just too many games. Let's just fight when you guys are both in your prime, like they do in MMA. just as a fan, does it mean I don't like Pacquiao as much? Does it mean I don't like Mayweather? Those guys are amazing. I just rather seen them fight in their best time. Like now I have to judge them individually. I'd rather say like, you know, Mike Tyson's the best during his era, right? And then I still feel that. Most of us feel like that way. When he came back and fought Lennox Lewis after he came out of prison, he was a different guy, right? I don't think he's the same. And speaking of that, I guess apparently they're going to fight again. Have you heard this, Gary?
I've heard those rumors. I haven't really been paying attention. There's been, well, with the move and trying to figure out what we're doing. There's a lot of stuff that has flown over my head because I haven't heard about it, but I have heard rumors of that. I think too, that's the, you know, me and you talking about fights. That's the difference, is that we're fight fans and we want to see the best fighters fight, where the promoters want money, and money comes from views, not from fight fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like, fight fans are obviously a big part of it, but if you have, you know, 25% of the population knows how good Floyd Mayweather is or how good Canelo is. So that 25% is going to tune in, but nobody else cares.
Yeah.
So you can throw a name like Logan Paul or Jake Paul, or, you know, if you can say, hey, it's a cross, that Conor McGregor has a whiskey now and he's cross promoting himself and he's a great talker, and hey, I'm going to go into box, and now it's a spectacle. And instead of 25% of interest, you're getting 65% of interest. It changes everything for the promoter. And I think that's always going to be the hard thing. Now that we've had this crossover from MMA guys going to boxing, and now with Clarissa Shields coming over to MMA and fighting in the PFL, like, we'll find out. I think she's taking it a little more serious than other people who have left boxing and come to MMA. But we're gonna see. Maybe we'll start seeing boxers try out the UFC or the MMA side.
And let's be honest, she's got more balls than most people, right? Like, again, Eddie Alvarez put it best, right? That little meme that I saw, whether he said it or not, I'm assuming he really did, but he said, if you want to say that you're the best at basketball, you play one-on-one. You don't have a 3-point shootout or a slam dunk contest. You have a one-on-one match and see who the best basketball player is. It's much the same as if you say you want to see who the best fighter is. You have a fight. A fight is MMA. You don't have a boxing match or a kickboxing match or a grappling match. I'm not going to grapple Floyd Mayweather and say I'm the best fighter in the world. Floyd Mayweather doesn't grapple. That's stupid. Right? As is if I box Floyd Mayweather and then say, well, he's the best fighter in the world. No, he's a better boxer than I am, right? They're different sports. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of old school boxers have gotten to the real world, right? As MMA fans, we get it. Meaning that we love boxing. I love kickboxing. I love MMA. I love grappling. They're all individual sports. I know the difference between the two. I also don't say because Mayweather lost to Floyd Mayweather, or that Royce Gracie beat whatever that guy was with one glove. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't say they're the best fighter. I just say that, like, they did the best at that situation. Ray Mercer beat Tim Sylvia in an MMA fight. However, even in the MMA fight, they were boxing, right? There was tons of boxers that did MMA that did poorly. James Toney against Randy Couture. But I'm not also knocking boxing like these traditional boxers do. They have a tendency to say MMA sucks. And I don't say James Toney suck or boxing sucks because they did MMA. Like, that's what I expect. If McGregor does boxing, never had a pro boxing fight in his entire life, like, I'm more like, hey, he did pretty good. But I'm also like, I think Mayweather carried him.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just a realist. Sometimes I get more annoyed at these traditional boxing fans that don't understand the difference. Like, even with the YouTube stars where they're like, Nate Robinson got his ass. Well, yeah, he doesn't fucking box. He plays basketball. They didn't play one-on-one basketball. They boxed. The better guy won that actually boxes, right? And to that extent, Jay Paul fought the worst MMA boxing guy of all time, Ben Askren, right? Not to knock Ben Askren because he's amazing athlete. He just doesn't box, right? And it looked like he took a payday, whether he did or not. He just looked like the worst shape of his life. And I've never seen somebody get knocked out and have their wife and them smile and laugh and celebrate. It looked like they're pretty happy. So I think they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. I am not angry as an MMA fan. I'm more like, I guess that's the part that bothers me is when I run into boxing fans and they're like talking on stuff that I don't get. I'm like, it's just a fight that I like to see. I don't figure it's boxing versus MMA. It's just, that's not what we were doing. If we were doing it, then they'd have a rematch in MMA and they're not going to. So like, it's not a thing, you know? But that all being said, like we said from the beginning, I'm a fight fan. Just a dude that likes to see. I don't care if it's Sally Joe from the trailer park. If she's fighting Mary Sue, let's watch that thing. Let's watch it, see what happens, right? You know?
Not only let's watch it, let's start putting money on it. I'm like, I want the guy with the blue shirt and the cut off jeans. That's what I want. Give me him.
Yeah, that's the thing. So was there any other? So this is what I've heard of. Is there any fight that I'm missing on that card, or we hit them all right?
I mean, the Ferguson fight. It seems as though Tony Ferguson.
Or what?
Well, he just doesn't tap to anything. Apparently, like I don't know if his ligaments are not made of the same thing that our ligaments are made of, but he was in a really deep inside heel hook, no, it was a standard, it was outside heel hook. So, but he was in a really deep heel hook, and everybody else would have tapped or their knee would have stopped working at that point. And instead of tapping, he proceeded to kick his opponent in the thigh and then kick him in the chest. And then he kicked his foot free, really? Which it just, everybody was talking about how he's I don't know, he's Elastoman or something. I don't know. He just doesn't have normal body.
You don't think he's injured today then? Is that what you're telling me?
He might be. I don't know. I haven't seen anything of him walking or any reports. And like I said, there's a lot of other stuff going on, so I haven't been able to catch up and follow up on him. But I would imagine he's at least fight sore. Yeah. But as to damage, or did he spend any time getting MRIs on his knees? I don't know.
So did he lose that fight?
Yeah.
So again, and you're probably, anybody listening is a bigger fight fan than me. So just so you guys know, like I don't get to watch a lot of fights, and it's funny because a lot of people write me on Instagram.
Oh, wait. No, he didn't. I'm sorry, he did not lose that fight.
Oh,
he won that. No, he won that fight via decision. That's what it was.
Well, here's what I was gonna say. So a lot of people write me on Instant Messenger or Instagram. And they say, "Hey, what's your picks on the fight?" And I'm just honest with people. I say, like, I don't watch fights anymore. I don't even know half these fighters. I'll just be honest. And they think because I own a gym, I should know, and maybe I should. But my favorite fighters were GSP and Anderson Silva, and a lot of the guys that aren't fighting anymore. And I just didn't update myself with the times because I'm not around as much as far as watching the fights and watching the new up and coming fighters. But I do know Ferguson seems to me, from the hype that was going on with fighting, what's his face, right?
Well, he was supposed to the 3-fight call off with Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, so it seems to me there's been a giant drop off, right? Where he's considered one of the best ever, and Ferguson is just, as most MMA fighters do, it seems like once, like a Machida, all those guys, once they lose one, they kind of go on a skid, right?
Yeah, and I've muddled all my words. Tony lost the fight not to tap, but due to a decision. So he did lose the fight to Dariush in a decision,
which makes more sense. So he's lost like 3 in a row, right?
So, yeah, that's.
So that's a big drop off from where like he's gonna beat what's his face? Say that again.
Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Khabib. Let's go with Khabib, but because I can say Khabib, but let's say and again, that's how far I am removed from that. I'm not being disrespectful. It's just that I don't get to watch a lot of fights anymore. I see the results just like everybody else. But my point is, don't ask me no more. Like, who do you think's gonna win the fight? I don't even know who's fighting. But I will say this: from everything I saw on the thing, where like, man, I can't believe that fight fell off because Tony's, they had all these memes that Tony's the man and Tony would do this, and then all of a sudden he's just not one anymore. And just like the internet does, instead of saying in MMA, which is close to boxing, meaning that like MMA should be different because people lose all the time, just like the conversation we just had, because they make you fight all the time. Now all of a sudden, from being the best ever and that he would beat Khabib to where, well, he wasn't that good anyway, right? It's kind of the same thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's lost 3 in a row, and now they're like, yeah, he wasn't that good anyway. It's a big, sharp decline.
But even Connor gets some of that now. Like,
he absolutely does.
It is amazing to me because I've never cared for Connor's outside the ring antics. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I am rooting against him because of all the stuff that he does outside. The trash talk and the throwing Monster energy drinks at people and dollies through windows of buses. And like, that's just not, for me, that's not the behavior that I would look for in somebody. Now I understand why he does it, because he made millions of dollars doing it. So, and it's hard for me to say that you're wrong in doing it because you're selling yourself and you've got a limited amount of time in your life, somewhere between your mid 20s to your early 30s for most fighters to make as much money as you possibly can. And so I get why he does it, but I'm rooting against that because of his actions. That being said, has nothing to do with his ability in the ring or in the cage, because he's an amazing fighter, had a laser guided missile for a left hand and starched guys left and right for the first 5 fights in the UFC, 6 fights in the UFC. So it has nothing to do with ability. And now you have Connor, who he lost to Khabib. He had the fight with Nate Diaz that he lost, and then he redeemed himself against Nate Diaz. He had the fight against Cowboy Cerrone, and now it looks like, okay, was that a legit win, or was that a win against Cowboy Cerrone, who was falling off? He's falling down the hill because Cowboy lost his latest fight, and it has nothing to do with his ability as a fighter. He was a great fighter, and he ran into some guys who were better than him, and that's all it is to it. Tony has always been a great fighter. I always looked at Tony as like a modern day Nate Diaz with a little more improvisation in his fight style. Very durable, never gasses. He's going to hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you. And they're not 90% power punches. It is 145, 50% punches that wear you out. And he imposes himself upon people and then destroys them in the 4th or 5th round. And, Tony we're all victims of father time. Jacare could be the same thing. He's 41. We talked about him earlier. Like, how many miles does that guy have on his body? Because decades of jiu-jitsu, and I mean, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu matches of all time is between Roger Gracie and Jacare, when Roger broke Jacare's arm. Jacare stuffs his arm in his belt and then goes on to beat beat Roger by points. Yeah. So he's another guy that's got tons of mileage on him. He's 41 years old, and he's in there fighting the best guys in the best shape of their life. Yeah. That could be part of it too. And Tony's starting to get up there. We could argue whether or not he had a little extra hype, being the fact that he was an Eddie Bravo guy, and Eddie Bravo would go on Joe Rogan. Every time that they would talk, Eddie would make it a point to say, hey, Tony Ferguson's the greatest guy ever. And now you've got the biggest podcast in the world with the most fight fans listening to hear Tony Ferguson is God. And so that boosts his stock as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And as somebody that doesn't, again, like, this doesn't hurt my feelings. It's just so everybody knows, I don't get to see a lot of fights. So it's funny. Like, again, I'm going to put this out there 1,000 times. Quit writing me, asking me who I've been. Because I don't freaking know. So that's I don't know a lot about him. But what I hear, since he's been on my radar, he's lost every time, meaning Ferguson, right? And you're exactly right. What I know is what I've heard on Joe Rogan. I'm a big Joe Rogan podcast listener because I'm in the car. For example, again, yesterday I drove to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, then to Cincinnati, Ohio, back to Charleston, West Virginia. I listened to like about 4 podcasts, 3 hours a piece. You know what I'm saying? Like I got through a lot of stuff, right? But I still don't watch the fights. I hear about them and I hear about the people and I get to learn about them. I get to learn about their lives. And I just don't know as much as people think I know about the actual fight as much as you know. So it's amazing to hear what I hear. But on that point, here's what I wanted to mention. I was writing down while you're talking. I wanted to bring this up. Another guy that's came through the gym that I know that your buddy and one of your students and one of your friends have got to roll with, which was Brett Monback, which was Anthony Rumble Johnson, who just had a fight recently. He had his fight pulled with Ivel Romero, which could have been amazing. But again, another fight that I didn't get to see that I saw the highlights. So the first highlight that I saw was Rumble 1-punch knockout. And I was like, that's my boy. That's what I thought. Yeah. However, then later in the day, another video popped up of him getting fucking knocked down and almost finished. Did you get to see that fight?
I only seen the highlights of that one as well. It was, and I actually seen all the questions about his abilities and like, oh, Rumble had some adversities, and I seen all that first before I seen the 1-punch.
Okay.
Death Star sleep missile. Again, you're talking about a guy who took what 4-5 years off of fighting.
Absolutely.
And
shit.
Yeah. We can talk trash about him, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback that stuff. But he's been hanging out in Florida, like living the good life, or wherever he's been, living the good life, enjoying life. And hey, you want to make a little money and come back, have a fight over here in Bellator and get into this tournament setup that we got? Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. So now he gets into there and makes a big paycheck. And did he look like a guy who had taken 5 years off? Yeah, he looked like he didn't lose any power in that time. And I think if you consider this like a tune-up match, I think if you look at it that way, it's better understanding of what he is right now.
Might be good that he didn't fight Romero, right? Because Romero didn't have as big of a layoff. And if he would have landed that punch, he could have finished it, right? This is just me looking on the outside, but people forget. Let's put into context. LeBron James had a couple months off from an ankle injury, and he comes back and he's not so good, right? And then he takes a little bit more time off, and he comes back and he's not so good. And people are like, "Hey, did you lose a step?" We're talking a month. We're not talking 4 or 5 years. And LeBron, obviously, still one of the top 5 basketball players, right? When he gets back into the groove and works in the playoffs, he's still going to be arguably top 5, top 10 of all the basketball players, right? Anthony Johnson took a lot of time off. Not only took a lot of time off, Garry and I saw him at about 100 pounds heavier, right?
He was huge.
Huge.
He was huge.
I don't understand. I don't even think people that don't know, they don't know. Like Biggie says, now you know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think they know. Like when you and I, like when we rolled with him and sparred with him and saw him, like even at my fattest, let's say that I'm 260, Rumble was like still about another 50 or 60 pounds bigger than me. Don't you agree?
He had to have been over 300 pounds.
Absolutely.
But not a fat 300 either. Like, oh my God. I've thought about that a couple times. I've heard people talk about, Joe Rogan talked about Dan Henderson, and like shaking hands with Dan Henderson was like shaking hands with a redwood. Like you're grabbing a branch on a giant tree.
Yeah.
And it's not muscle and connective tissue. Like it's just hardened steel, you know. And when I rolled with him, like I remember I'd done a little bit of an arm drag. I had him in guard. I did a little bit of an arm drag, and I was able to create a little bit of an angle. And then he grabbed my wrist with his other hand and just held me there, and I was stuck. I've never felt anything like nobody has ever grabbed. I'm a pretty strong guy. I'm not the strongest guy, but I'm a pretty strong guy. And when I move myself, I can usually move others, and I couldn't budge him. And that was it. I had a realization there that thank God we're not punching each other.
Yeah.
Because if he hits me, I'm gonna die. And so so for him to cut from 300 pounds back down, not to 265, but back down, or maybe was it a heavyweight?
I think it's 205. I think they're 205.
I think they fought at 205 to cut that. You're talking about 95 pounds to cut. And most of that was muscle.
Abs. Yes.
Yeah.
And for context, this is not two average Joes. This is a 3rd/4th degree black belt. Garry, who should be a black belt, who's a brown belt, who beats black belts, who also I can go through the myriad of people at my gym, Mike Dias, Brett Monbach, who are not shabby. Let's say that they're blue belts at best. That he would let them take their back and put in a rear naked, and he would just reach back and throw them like a child across the ring. We're not talking, these are also other fighters who fight in MMA, granted, not the UFC, but MMA across Ohio. Like, this reminds me, because this is not the first time, and Garry and I both have a lot of friends that are in the UFC and other events, but it's like if you play one-on-one with a friend or a college player, and then also Michael Jordan shows up, and then you're like, fuck, one-on-one with Michael Jordan is a different animal, right? Like, I'm lucky. The only reason I scored is maybe he took a couple steps back and let me, right? That was much like Anthony Johnson. Like, we grappled, and I would argue that he's not that good at grappling.
Yeah. I made that statement to my guys. I said, listen, if we went skill for skill, I am 100% convinced that I have more grappling skill than what Anthony Johnson does.
Yes.
He'd still murder me in a grappling match because I can't do what he does.
Yeah. And laughed at everybody. And he would just joke with you. Like, if you took his back and try to submit him, he'd be like, what are you doing? And laugh at you. Right? Like, anyway, I mean, so props to him. I'm glad that it happened and we got to see it, you know. I didn't want to miss that in amongst the UFC. So like,
well, no. And that being said, I'm going to tell you now, he's the nicest guy.
Absolutely.
We went out to dinner with him and we had conversations, and me and him talked about old fights, pride fights, and he had done his history, and he talked about all of his fights. He had already fought Glover by that point, I think, Glover Teixeira, when we had met up with him, and because it was after he had left. But we had talked about his Glover Teixeira fight. And he had all of the time in the world for me. Not unlike your experience with the UFC, my experience with Anthony Rumble was the same thing. He talked to me like me and him had known each other for ages. So me saying that the only reason I say I have more grappling knowledge than him is because I know what an omoplata is, and I know how to get, a lot of gi stuff that he probably wouldn't know. So technically, and maybe I could teach it better than him too, but technically, as far as grappling goes, I'm certain I know more grappling jiu-jitsu techniques than he does. But the dude he's I don't know if you watch TikTok or anything like that, but there's this TikTok going around, and this guy says he cracks an egg with his bicep, and a lot of people made fun of it, but he goes, I'm built different. Well, yeah. Anthony Rumble Johnson 100% is built different. Like, he's not a normal human being.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you remember him hitting the bags in my basement. Every time a jab would make the bag fly across the room, which makes more sense when we see him knock people out with one punch, right?
Yeah,
And to that point, obviously you're moving, but let's have him back somewhere. Really,
absolutely.
let's have it. So shout out, so you guys know, shout out to Joshua Carey from Huntington, West Virginia, who is one of his good friends, and hooked us up with that seminar, and is a good friend, and also a shout out to Anthony Johnson, who's to this day, I don't write him, but I do know Lisa Roberts from my gym, and happy birthday to Lisa Roberts. It's her birthday today. But anyway, she still writes him to this day, and he still responds. And look, people don't need to do that. He's a professional athlete making a lot of money, and he makes his time. He takes time out to respond to people at my gym in West Virginia and Ohio. Thank you for that. But let's move on. Like, speaking of amazing fighters, practitioners, people we get to work out with, June 6th is again Dean Lister. Last time he was supposed to come in May, he blew up his spleen.
Spleen.
Yeah, which nobody knows how you can do other than have a hit and run accident like Dean Lister did. But I listened to, and for anybody that hasn't listened to it, I listened to a great podcast on the way to my seminar to Weirton, West Virginia the other day, by John Donaher and Lex Friedman. 3 hours plus. I will be honest, and Gary, that whether we do it today or not, but I'm going to change the way I train, or change the way I coach, and change the way I teach, according to John Donaher in that podcast. It was amazing. I don't know if you listened to it yet, but anyway, that was one thing that I listened to, but it reminded me what made me think of it, because he gets a lot of credit, John Donaher. They said, hey, like, listen, you're the guy that said, why ignore 50% of the body? And he said, hey, I actually didn't say that. Dean Lister said that. He said it to me. Dean Lister was training with John Donaher and the Renzo Gracie guys. And that's about the time that he started doing leg locks and went to ADCC, and, if I'm not mistaken, submitted Saulo Hiberio with an ankle lock. And that was about the time that nobody really did them. And that he said, hey, why are we ignoring 50% of the body when we could be doing all these leg locks? And that, according to the podcast I listened to, Lex Friedman, that rang a bell with John Donaher, and it revolutionized his training, which in turn made the John Donaher Death Squad, which is Gary Tonin and Craig Jones and Gary
Gordon Ryan.
Yeah, and all those guys. Revolutionized jiu-jitsu. That's changing everything for Gary and I and everybody else in the world. All came from Dean Lister, and he fully gave him credit on that podcast. So, Dean Lister, here, June 6th, Charleston, West Virginia. What say you about that, Gary?
I'm crazy excited about it. I've only dabbled with leg lock stuff. Nate was nice enough to come up and teach like a little mini seminar about leg locks and leg lock entries for us, and a little bit about finishing heel hooks and transitioning to inside heel hooks and stuff like that. But I'm an infant at it. I look at leg locks a lot like I look at striking. It's something new and hard that I need to get good at, and so I'm excited about it. I take tons of notes, and so I'm ready to take a ton of notes and then start working on stuff back home.
Yeah, and so BJJ Fanatics had a IBJJF legal DVD that Dean Lister made, which of course is important, because if you do the gi and no gi are different. We can't leg reap in the gi. That makes it kind of complicated.
Just a second.
You're fine, because I made a giant fucking alarm in the first 30 seconds. But regardless, anyway, in the gi, which is more popular, or which is important, the gi, I do a lot of gi work. I am a 3rd/4th degree black belt, ready to begin my 4th degree black belt. One of the reasons I don't care about leg locks in the gi is because there's a lot of things I don't need to worry about, meaning like mostly heel hooks, leg reaping, things like that, which kind of eliminates like most of the game. which also makes you not really apt to learn the leg lock game because you don't have to worry about it. However, no-gi is getting more popular, more important. If you listen to Gordon Ryan's last podcast, he made the statement, whether you agree or not agree, that within 10 years, he thinks the gi jiu-jitsu is going to be basically null and void, that no-gi is more important. It doesn't matter if you agree with it or not agree with it. It's another avenue to learn. So you need to learn it. And I'm in that group, right? I'm a black belt that I could choose to say, fuck those no gi guys. Gi's where it's at, and I could hide in my comfortable little house and and hide behind no leg reaping and no heel hooks and do what I would do and still be who I am. But that's not the evolution of jiu-jitsu and where things are going, and I need to get better, and that's why we're bringing Dean Lister in. So he might not at this point. John Danaher has the bigger name, but also I do think that for people that don't know, I have a lot of people at my gym. I don't know about you, Gary, but I have a lot of people at my gym who started jiu-jitsu because they listened to the Jocko podcast. They don't know that Dean Lister is actually Jocko's instructor. Which is ironic, not ironic, but more, I guess, coincidental. I think people misuse ironic as a term a lot. But anyway, it's one of those things where people can say like, hey, man, that's pretty cool. So now is an opportunity, is my point, where we can learn from one of the best, one of the pioneers, one of the all-time greatest, Dean Lister. If you guys have been paying attention to Instagram, he just did a seminar at Matt Serra's gym, who's part of Henzo, who's part of John Danaher, who's part of the best leg locking system in the world. So if they're having Dean Lister in, that tells you this guy is one of the best, baddest motherfuckers in the world. He's coming to our gym on June 6th. Now's your opportunity to learn from one of the best. What's your thoughts on this, Gary? What do you think for your guys and for anybody that's listening? What can you tell them? Why should they show up right now?
Well, again, you're learning from. Now this is my personal opinion. I think he's probably one of the top 10, 15 guys all time in competitive jiu-jitsu. He had a streak of like 14, 15 years or something crazy where he was not tapped and not submitted. And we kind of talked about it. We were lucky enough to have him on one of our podcasts. If you go on Spotify, you can listen to that podcast we had with Dean. But he had such an amazing run competitively that most guys can't ever say that they did. And when going back to he hadn't been tapped, he had talked about, when he thinks about jiu-jitsu, submission is king, kind of like knockout is king. And he didn't play for points. He was there to finish the match. He wanted to finish it before the time limit. He didn't want to win by an advantage. And so it was, I think, like I said, top 15 guy all time. He's amazing. It's $75 to come in to learn from him. It's probably the biggest bargain of all time. If I had to guess. So I think everybody should stop whatever they're doing on June 6th, grab a notebook, tell your wife you love her, and get down there and train, because there's no reason that you can't be there.
No, that's a good point. We've got one of, arguably, jiu-jitsu's got a few people that made historical landmarks, right? You can go to Taekwondo and Kung Fu. You might not find, especially recent guys, that have changed your sport as much as Dean Lister has changed our sport, or John Danaher. And those two are intermixed, whether you want to admit it or not. John Danaher was directly influenced, as he would say in the last podcast, by Dean Lister. One of the podcasts I listened to on Joe Rogan with Jocko, he just talked about all the insane moves that Dean Lister invents, comes up with, how much he's an innovator of our sport. It literally is like training with LeBron James or Michael Jordan or whoever. We've got this opportunity right now to expand our knowledge, train with one of the best, do some immediate amazing things. on June 6th. And look, listen, it doesn't matter how, I'm not going to cap it out. Like, for example, I had Vanderlei Silva here years ago. We had 200 people at the seminar. So it doesn't matter how many people come. 200 is a lot for my gym, but I will rent a bigger place. I will rent a high school gymnasium, a college gymnasium. If 3,000 people sign up, I would go. We don't have that many people, so we don't have to worry about that right now. But the most important thing, why I'm here today, what I am doing, what I think my mission, for my life is to continue jiu-jitsu in West Virginia. I'm assuming Gary's the same in Ohio. I'm trying to make my point. So my point, my legacy is to do all that I can to improve everybody in West Virginia. It doesn't mean from Butch Hiles Jiu-Jitsu or Garry is Jiu-Jitsu, Bobcat Jiu-Jitsu. It means everybody. It doesn't matter. I just want to make Jiu-Jitsu better in the world in this side. So we have Dean Lister here. I'm excited. I think that we can all get better. And then on top of that, I'm going to run, just so you guys know, I'm going to run the same deal. I ran it. It makes a little less sense this time than it did last time. But at the last tournament/seminar, I said for $100, you could do both, right? So normally the seminar is $75, normally to compete $65/$85, depending on when you go. For $100, you can do both, so $50/$50. So the seminar is on June 6th. The tournament is on June 26th, right? In Nelsonville, Ohio, which is the first tournament in the history of Nelsonville, Ohio. But the point is, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to do both. We're trying to grow jiu-jitsu in Ohio, in this little sliver of Nelsonville, Ohio, grow jiu-jitsu in West Virginia, Ohio through Dean Lister, through all these podcasts we listen to, and do our part in making everybody a little bit better than they were today, including ourselves, so we can help the guys that we train. And this is our opportunity. Look, I can't say enough. I know I feel kind of douchey saying all this stuff because I feel like people are like, yeah, you're just trying to pitch your shit. But here, I also would mention this, like, for those guys that think that Garry or I, especially I, make money off this stuff, maybe a little bit sometimes, just to be honest. That's why I'm saying that, but not really, because I lose more money than I give, so sometimes I make some money on some things, sometimes I lose money on things. These things, by the time I pay for Dean Lister's travel, his hotel, his plane ticket, his everything, there's no money to be made here. This is to make jiu-jitsu better in the region, and also to make myself better. I'm not going to lie and say, hey, I'm just doing this to make everybody in West Virginia, Ohio better. No, that's not true. That's part of it, but I'm also trying to make myself better. There's nothing wrong with that. There's not, right? Like, that's a little selfish. If I can make everybody better and then also make myself better, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I'm trying to do, and make my students better. That's what we're trying to do, right? Again, there's nothing wrong. If you think there's something wrong with it, there's not. I'm trying to share that everybody. We're not trying to keep this private. In the history of my life, I've given every opportunity to make everybody better at everything that I do. And I think Gary's the same. If I learn how to box, I'm trying to make you a better boxer. If I learn how to do kickbox, I'm trying to make you better. If I learn how to do jiu-jitsu, I'm trying to make you better. Same thing here. So let's do it. Let's do both. But even if you don't do both, like, I don't care. I just want to make you better. Let's do Dean Lister. Let's make Dean Lister happy that he came for West Virginia/Ohio. It's in Charleston. It's at my gym. But Garry was instrumental in also setting this up. We have the same contact in our friend David here. We have the same goal. I agree, Garry. I'm talking to you, or talking for you, but we're trying to make everybody better in our selection.
Right. Well, and talking about that, and the guys who are in West Virginia, the guys who are in Southeastern Ohio, part of bringing WVGO to Nelsonville and bringing it to Athens County is to raise interest, right? And if I always think of this as we're all in this together, whether you're, a Helson Gracie guy, if you're a Bobcat guy, if you're a Butch Hiles guy, if you're Ground Zero, this is a collective. We're all like, it's such a small community that if we don't help each other, that it's not going to survive. It's a small community, and smaller communities need everybody pulling together, you know. So
Absolutely.
when we do these things, it's good to have a good turnout, not because anybody's making money, but because if we can get Dean Lister to say, "Damn, I went down to Charleston, West Virginia, and those guys that they turned out, it's, you know, a smaller community. It's not like Los Angeles or San Diego or New York, and they still came out and gave everything. I want to go back to that place, you know." Same thing. If we can, if we want to inspire not just WVGO to come to Athens, but you know, we have Ohio University right there on campus. If we can drum up interest in our community with jujitsu, with a jujitsu tournament, maybe things like Grappling Industries, Nagas, those things will come to us as well as going to Cincinnati. Because right now, if you live in Southeast Ohio, the closest that you're going to have for a drive is an hour and a half for any kind of tournament, and that's if you're lucky, you know. So if we want to have these things close to home, we need to drum up the interest not only in our students but in our surrounding area.
Which is a good point. I think, I'm sorry, I'm trying to add this video, but I think people forget that, right? Like you and I, we have a responsibility, first of all, to our students. We do everything we can. But number two, I think you and I got this for the same reason. We're trying to help everybody. And that sounds a little bit crazy, but when I'm dead and gone, I want to know that I did all that I could do for the stuff that I loved, which is jujitsu, right? So tournaments, all those things are, and seminars, it helps me. It helps my people at my gym, but it helps my community. It helps my friends. It helps everything. So when I'm dead and gone, if I can say I did everything I could do for everything, for the things that I love and the things that were important to me, then I had a great life, right? And that's what makes me happy. Like, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm 44 right now. I'm looking for those things to make an impact on my city, my state, my friends, my world. You're my world, right? Like right now, honestly, like Garry and Bobcat MMA and Starbrick at BJJ. That's my world. I'm looking for things to do to impact my world, and this is it, man. Like if we can bring Dean Lister in, and then hopefully someday Gordon Ryan and John Donaher. I've had opportunities to bring both of them in. It just didn't work out at the time. Um, hopefully it works out. And then to that matter, right? Let's talk about this thing too, real quick. I just taught a seminar this weekend at Weirton BJJ, or Weirton Bondo. Actually, they do more than BJJ. They do fighting, which is really self-defense street fighting, close to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I want to bring that up real quick because here's what I want to say. First of all, I want to give credit to those guys for stepping out of the box. The Bondo is a traditionally, it was a martial art that somebody in Vietnam discovered, and involved in everything. You know, they've kind of transitioned over the years. They do a lot of kickboxing in Athens, right? Have you guys been to Bondo tournaments before?
I've not been to a Bondo tournament before, but I know guys who train Bondo who have competed in them.
Yeah, so and it's effective. They do weapons. They do everything. It's just like any other martial art. They're very good guys. They decided they're going to go out of their comfort zone and learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it became the UFC, right? Something very important. And I commend those guys. So, like a lot of times when I run into the jiu-jitsu community, they'll have a tendency to knock people that are not jiu-jitsu, right? It's a kind of a weird thing. They're like, if you're kung fu, they'll talk shit about you. Like, I get it. Kung fu talks about us, like we talk about them. But they've stepped out of their comfort zone. They're learning jiu-jitsu because they did have a grappling component, and they're adding it into their stuff. And I give them a ton of credit because I went down to Weirton, West Virginia, which is close to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We had a great seminar. We taught them the basics. They've got a lot of new guys. They've kicked some butt. They're adding this to their system, which is again a different traditional martial arts system that deals with self-defense or street fighting. But the reason I want to bring this up is because Garry and I, amongst everybody, we're here to spread jiu-jitsu, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, whatever we're involved with in West Virginia / Ohio to everybody. And I think Gary, I speak for you. Like, listen, if you need us, if you want us for a seminar, if you want us to help, we're not looking for, hey, Gary Hashman's here, Butch Hiles Butch Hiles. We're not looking for that recognition. We're just looking to help, right? Like wherever that's at. So if you have a gym, it doesn't matter if you do Taekwondo and you dabble in grappling, you want to learn grappling, I'm here. I just want to make everything better. And I'm not going to be like, your Taekwondo sucks. My jujitsu is better. I can learn from everybody. Let's be here. Like, instead of being martial art versus martial art, that's what the UFC is for. Like, look, everybody's MMA and the best martial art is going to survive. Supposedly, that's what it's made for. But coincidentally / ironically, it is actually whatever works, right? It's no longer style versus style. It's just like a little bit of everything. I'm just here to make everybody better. And if you want to be my friend, I want to be your friend. I think Gary's the same. So like, if you want either of us here to teach you some jiu-jitsu, teach you some MMA on top of your traditional martial art, are you into that, Gary? Because I am.
Absolutely. I it's where Starbreak and Bobcat came from. Was I just enjoy teaching people what I know, what I love. I love jujitsu, and sharing that with people, and you know, the benefits. We've had conversations about the benefits, the mental benefits of jujitsu. Obviously, there are the physical benefits of jujitsu, and getting into shape. Um, and then goal setting. I think it's always good to get good at something you suck at. And jujitsu, there's a long road of goals that you can overcome. The first day you show up, I need to get through warm-ups, and then the first month I need to learn how to do this submission. First year, okay, now I'm not getting submitted all the time. Then you get to a point where maybe, okay, I'm getting close to my blue belt. So now there's constant goals, and it never stops. You're always going to have something new to chase. I look at it a lot like weightlifting. Weightlifting is slow progress. If anybody's been to the gym or whatever, you only put 2.5 pounds, 5 pounds, 10 pounds at a time. It's you don't start weightlifting and like, today I benched 135, tomorrow I bench 225, and then I'm benching 315. It's slow progress, but it's slow, sustainable progress. And that's what's nice about it, is like every day, like, hey, sometimes the progress is I didn't get tapped 5 times today. I only got tapped 4 times today. Eventually, you're the guy trying to tap somebody for the 6th time in a round. It's just, you got to stick with it. And it's nice that I want to share that with people. I want to share that, knowing the Garry that was around in 2011 before he started doing this stuff. Like, that guy is nowhere near as happy, self-confident as what I am today. Like, there are two different people that exist, and I want to share that with everybody.
Absolutely. And I think, and for that matter, whether you're going to own a gym or you're not going to own a gym, right? You can
Right.
still share your knowledge inside of the gym that you're at.
Yeah.
And that's important too, I think. And that all makes us feel better. If I know, if I shared somebody that got into a UFC fight or an MMA fight and they won, like secretly, I'd be like, I helped him, right? And you may take more credit for that. You can be like, I showed him that move that made him knock that guy out, and blah blah, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not what I'm in it for, right? And you're not either. But it still makes you feel good, right? Right? I've got 100 stories of people like, I showed them that move, like being at like a jiu-jitsu tournament and somebody showing a takedown and somebody doing it and hearing somebody yell out in the corner, I showed them that move, and the elation and how it makes people feel, even though they know they contributed to what happened just now. And I don't, at this point in my life, as a 44-year-old man, I don't need that whatever you call it. I just don't need that.
The pats on the back aren't necessary anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to say, I don't need, like, when you win a tournament, let's say that was you, I don't need to, at the end of the tournament, say, well, I showed Gary that, right? I don't need that. I don't at all. I will never 100% say that. But what I will say at this point in my life, I will be happy for you beyond measure because I love you as a human and I love everybody at my gym in the same way because I know that it means different things to different people. That when you show up and you win a tournament, or you show up and you just do good at a tournament, or you just show up and you showed up at a tournament and that meant the world for you because you have anxiety and this tournament it scares you and it hurts you and it's the world for you and it's like being in a car accident and just showing up is a big thing and that you conquered that fear and you did this thing and it made you a better person. That's what I live for because that's going to be my legacy when I die. You may or may not ever say my name, and that doesn't matter. It actually doesn't mean what I think it means as a legacy. What it means is that I passed on what somebody passed on to me, and to me it was Hoist Gracie and Marcelo Montero and Gary Hashman and everybody else that contributed to everything I know. And the same for you. It's a lot of people that contributed to what I know and what I pass on. And those things are priceless, right? Those moves are priceless and those things are priceless. And the opportunities are priceless. And by priceless, I mean that when I think back of some of the people that compete in tournaments and some of the people that compete in jiu-jitsu or boxing or kickboxing and how they do and how it changed their life, sometimes it makes me emotional, right? It makes me happy for them. It has nothing to do with me, just because I know what it means to that person. And then sometimes just relaying that message to somebody else makes me almost want to cry. And that's actually what makes my life, I think, worth living to this day, and what makes it worth going to the gym at 6 p.m. every day to teach when I've had the hardest, complicated, most difficult day at real work where people hate me and where they don't care about anything else. You know what I'm saying? They're more worried about, I work in the hospital, so they're more worried about their personal health and how they feel, what it means to their bottom line. But when I get past all that stuff and I get back to the gym and I know what it means to my friends, that's what makes it quote unquote worth it. To give even today, it's Sunday, and Gary and I are here at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. on a Sunday when our wives are pissed that we're not paying attention to them, and our kids are pissed. But it makes it all worth it when I know that it changed somebody's life, right? I know.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, and I think this is a good way to close it up. Is like I'm just happy to be on this ride with you. You know, I don't, like you said, I don't need the adulation and I don't need the celebration of me. If you want to say that I contributed, great. I appreciate that. I'm just happy for you. If you competed, man, thanks for wearing my patch. I appreciate that. And I hope that whatever I said over on the sidelines helped. But I'm just proud. I'm just proud to be with you on this journey. It's a great journey. All of this, just life in general, all of this is great. And so to be on it with you is awesome. When you compete, when you, and even not only my guys who are competing, I'm thankful for the guys who are competing against my guys. I'm thankful for the guys that I've competed against. I've had good relationships with people who have beat me in competition or I've beaten competition as I have with some of my students or some of the guys that I train side by side with. So I'm just, the whole experience is a blessing for me, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. Make sure, guys, if you can, the 6th, try and get down to Charleston. Dean Lister is going to be there. It's going to be amazing. The 26th of June, it is going to be in Nelsonville. First competition in Athens County. Let's blow it up. Let's make it big. Let's make sure that Southeastern Ohio, West Virginia is as well known for jiu-jitsu as anybody. There's no reason that we can't do it. We got, you think about Athens County has Joey Burrows, right? He played in the NFL, went #1 in the NFL. There's no reason that we can't be turning out great jiu-jitsu practitioners along with great football players. I think it's all a state of mind and just getting in there and doing it. And so, we have the opportunity to drum up some support and interest, and and make jiu-jitsu big in Southeast Ohio and West Virginia.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful.
Thanks, sir.